Thousands of years ago, God called a people to himself. He made a name for himself and proved himself to those people. He established laws and statutes by which they should live. He laid out the terms of a covenant that he was extending to them and told them, if you follow these things that I have commanded of you, I will not put on you any of the diseases that I put on the Egyptians. You saw what I did. I made a name for myself. I have proven myself to you. You know who I am. Now obey me. Now worship me as your only God. Don't worship any other gods. Don't set up images. Distribute justice. Do not oppress. Do not bear false witness against one another. Treat each other with decency and propriety. Take care of one another. Be separated from the rest of the world, and yet still bless the foreigner. Don't glean all of the crops to the edge of your field. Leave some for the foreigner. Let them be blessed through you. Take care of one another. Become holy as the Lord is holy. And when I begin to send plague or famine, or I touch the earth, I begin to harm the earth, you're my people. Recognize that I am communicating with you and return to me. Recognize that you've gotten too far. Return to me and I will heal you, and I will heal your land, and I will restore you. And the people listened, and some rebelled, and some obeyed. And some rebelled and went into captivity, and then they obeyed. They returned to him and recognized that they'd been handed over to the spirit that they had chosen. They returned to him, and he kept his promise. They rent their hearts to him. They examined themselves, and when they brought themselves to him, they acknowledged who they had been, who he had been, who they are, and who he is, where they had gone in error, and they changed. They turned from their wicked ways. Now, let me tell you what the pagans were doing. They were sacrificing human lives, passing their own children through the fire, bowing down to trees, and setting up gods made of stone and gold, silver, bronze, gods that have no eyes, gods that have no mouths, cannot speak for themselves, have to be picked up and moved to the location where they're going to sit and literally do nothing. They went to soothsayers, psychics, sorcerers, wise men, to tell them whether they were going to live or die. They engaged in witchcraft, doing potions and tinctures and medications to put people in the spirit, to be manipulated, to be cut open, to engage in satanic ritual. Medications, pharmakia. They had no understanding and no knowledge that there's a creator who created us, and he's the one who heals us. They had no knowledge or understanding of what he requires, what he had commanded of his people. And his people were told that salvation would come through them, that they had a responsibility to be the light of the world, to share with others what God had commanded, so that they too could eventually be saved. And people continued in these rituals, they continued in these sacrifices and ingesting man's medications, defiling the temple of God. And quote unquote wise men began to rise up, philosophers who had grand ideas in the delusions of their own minds regarding the creations that they had no role in creating. In fact, they're created by the same God that created those creations, but they saw fit to change what God established, to claim that they had some sort of wisdom that merely came from them, came from their own ideas. It didn't come from God's word. It didn't come from divine revelation. It came from man, the same man who's fragile and dependent, who can't control his own life or his own body, his own mind or his own fate. And God rebuked people for chasing after things that pagans chase after, being wise in their own eyes, their own foolish ideas, going to Beelzebub or any number of fools to tell them whether they are going to live or die, to give them medications to take, cut them open, and tell them who they are, as though man created man. And a great number of wise men of the world were exalted with their fantastic ideas. Isaac Newton, Charles Darwin, Sigmund Freud, all with fantastical ideas that mean absolutely nothing. Ideas without knowledge, ideas that will not save. Through the works of Newton, only that which was rational and measurable and viewed by the human eye was real. Everything in the spiritual realm was out the window, because man controls by his own hands, right? Man knows best. And although others had talked about the theories of evolution, Charles Darwin was the one who popularized this evolutionary theory. claiming that man evolved. There is no creator. You are here not to take care of each other. In fact, if you take care of each other, you're weak. You're not fit. Survival of the fittest states that you look out for number one. You don't look out for anyone else. That's weakness. You don't have concern for the oppressed. You step on their heads on the way up. And Freud came along and he rewrote what God established in terms of the nature of our soul. He reduced everything to drives and ego, instincts. That's all you are. Just like Darwin said, you just evolved. These are just your instincts. They're survival instincts. Embrace them. They're not the flesh. No personal accountability here. You don't need to worry about that anymore. There's no creator holding you accountable. You live for yourself. Just make sure your ego is under control. Carl Jung, Friedrich Nietzsche. These are your gods now, and you can be an expert too. All you have to do is regurgitate. All you have to do is cite all of these experts and keep the lie going. And as time has gone on, humankind has been reduced to computers, told that they heal in the flesh, the mind and body, cognitions and behaviors, told that they're separated into physical illness, mental illness. Oh, and the two interact. Nothing about spirituality, nothing about God's creation, no understanding whatsoever. They measure and they observe and they do all of these things and they never have any understanding, always learning and never having any knowledge because they deny truth. Because they deny what God has established, they cannot understand truth. Let me ask you what the spirit is behind this field. In March 2023, MAID for mental illness, MAID, stands for medical assistance in dying. Well, that's a sweet way to say it. They're going to assist you while dying. But actually what that means is that you're not actually dying. You're choosing to kill yourself. It's medical assistance in suicide because these are not people who are dying. That is going to go into effect in Canada. A complete normalization of suicide. So you go through a breakup, you're brokenhearted, no worries. Medicine has already normalized killing yourself. God's being a little hard on you in this life, no problem. We'll take that into our own hands, thank you very much. We're your gods now. Is this not what they've been doing all along? Is it not building up to something so grotesque and disgusting? You tell me what the spirit is behind this field. This is a spirit that wants to covet God's creations. This is a spirit who thinks that it can set up gods to decide whether you're going to live or die, to inject you with poisons, to cut open your body. And you know what? This field has no desire to heal you. They do not. The field of science, whether it's mental health, physical health, doesn't matter. They have no desire to heal you. The spirit behind that field has no desire to heal you. And when you turn away from what God has commanded you, when you turn away from the God who says he created you and he healed you, what can you expect? And these doctors claim that they can tell whether someone is in their right mind or they're suicidal. You know, last I checked, it used to be that if someone wanted to take their life into their own hands, that they were definitely suicidal and that it was important to get them help. But now that we've discovered that mental health doesn't actually help those who are so-called mentally ill, now we're going to sacrifice these human beings and call it medical assistance in dying, knowing darn well that this is medical assistance in suicide, taking someone else's life into your hands and allowing other people and normalizing for other people that they are killing themselves, that they are taking God's creation and making an executive decision that only belongs to God. He gives life and he takes life. That decision belongs to God. But somehow we've made this a good thing, that these people are seeking relief and should be allowed dignity. The dignity of what? Of someone co-signing their cowardice to not pick up what God has given them in this life? Of co-signing their enticement all the way to hell? How can you possibly be saved if you've chosen to end the life and the covenant that was extended to you? This is murder to the nth degree. It's not even just murder in the physical, it is spiritual murder. How can we do that? How can we justify that? And how can we justify continuing to go to a field discipline who thinks these things are okay? There are people who've had electroconvulsive therapy, medications, talk therapy, all numbers of treatment, and they never got better. And instead of saying something's wrong here, instead of, dare I say, return to the creator, this has become the solution. Medically assisted suicide for people who are quote unquote mentally ill. That's where we're at. So where are we in the sciences, guys? You think it was a good idea for Newton and Freud and research to do away with the spiritual, to do away with what God established, to only attend to the rational? Even though Paul said we're not in a battle of flesh and blood. We're in a spiritual battle. You need to know the schemes of the devil, who, by the way, is not rational. You can't see him with your eyes. You can't figure him out with your brain. You need to live by the Spirit, not by your carnality, not by false gods, not by the works of your hands, and not by your own ideas. This is where we're at. This is what we were born into following, and this is what we've been chasing. And it hasn't done anything good for us. And when it's drained all the resources out of you, this is what they say is dignity. Let them have their relief. Let them rest now. If you take your life, you won't be resting. You take the life God gave to you, you will not be resting. You chose to end that covenant before it was fulfilled. You chose not to fight the good fight. You chose not to finish the race. And I understand that some of you have people in your lives who committed suicide. You know that my father did as well. I know others who also did. There is no way that we can justify this. And there is no way that you can, in good faith, in good conscience, look at this field and see what they're doing, see the fruit, test the spirit, and say that this is from God, that God uses the very science that denies him. And I'm not speaking this message for fun, because invariably, every time I speak a message like this against science, people drop off the channel, people send me nasty messages, but I'm going to continue speaking the truth, because that's the only thing that's going to save you. I went through what God established. You cannot reconcile what's going on in this field with what God established, with what he said. Anyone who does not shepherd you back to God is not from him. So how can we justify using that? Especially when those so-called experts attempt to replace him, attempt to covet his own creation. I hope you'll consider the message. I hope that those who have ears to hear will hear the message. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.